Genshin fans have waited for what feels like an eternity for Scaramouche to be playable. Now known as the Wanderer, he seems like a pretty fun character to use. How's it going, everyone? This is Kay, and we're back at it again with the Gacha Hell. So I hope your wallet's still alive, cause this 3.3 update will have some amazing high tier characters. Coming back are Mama Shogun, Itto, and Ayato. As always, I'll break down all the character strengths, weaknesses, and how to use them, and who you should pull for. Starting off with one of the most anticipated characters since the 1.1 updates? Regardless, fans have waited for this day and he's finally here. As you know, Scara is a Anemo Hyper Carry unit who has good range and fast attacks. Important thing to note is that his primary way to deal damage is from his E skill. You won't really use his auto or charge attacks unless he's floating first. When flying, there will be a meter that will constantly drop. I'll call it KP for short, and when it's depleted, his skill will end and Scara will fall down. Dashing mid-air will consume more KP, and jumping, which makes him fly even higher, will also consume KP. Within a rotation, you'll set up with your supports, then switch into him, use his E, then attack till the skill is done, which will then let you do a plunge attack. Afterwards, use his burst to step on enemies, then switch back to support and repeat the cycle. His A4 can help with dashing and can be vital for dodging and recovering from hits. Basically, when hitting enemies with his normal or charge attacks, you'll get a chance to trigger a descent effect, which will allow him to dash once without consuming KPs. As of right now, it's a 16% chance to trigger the descent effect, and that chance will increase by 12% every 0.1 seconds when he hits with his attacks. Also, when he has the descent effect, once you dash, you'll shoot arrows and the effect will reset. His A4 is meant to help with one of his possible weaknesses. According to leaked gameplay footage, Scara has no resistance towards getting hit. This means when a Hilichurl chucks a rock at the guy, he just falls down. So you want to use his dash to recover mid-air, which is where his A4 comes very handy. Scaramouche is very flexible in teams because you'll want to use him with enablers. A1 also gives him a boost depending on which elements he comes into contact with when activating his skill, which has an initial animal damage before floating. Hydro gives more KP, Pyro increases attack, Cryo boosts his crit rate, and Electro restores energy to him. You can have two different buffs at once. Obviously, he works well with the big three of Genshin Impact for a Scaramouche national team, which can be very strong. Interestingly, Toma and Layla can be great allies since they provide a shield for him while also enabling elements for his attacks. He's heavily reliant on his E skill, but the talent does have low cooldown, and his burst energy costs 60, so very low. He's flexible within team builds, as mentioned before, being able to work with many supports and sub DPS. Of course, he's a strong Anemo damage dealer, and with Faruzan being released with him, who is considered the Goro for Anemo, he has high potential to be a top tier character, but I'd always recommend waiting at least a week after his release if you are into the whole meta thing. That way, there can be proper testing and players can be more sure of who to pull for. Arataki Itto fans rejoice, our favorite Oni is back. He's yet another hyper carry character who has a pretty restrictive team due to Geo not really working well with other elements, but because he has such a dedicated team, it's known to be one of the highest damaging teams in the game. He really only fits into a triple or mono Geo build. Sure, you can have him with split teams, but he performs best with Geo, specifically Goro. Everyone's favorite puppy really strengthened Geo allies and is practically made for Arataki Itto. The only other characters that really offer the best performance with him is Albedo for high off-field damage or Zhongli for defense, so team is not really flexible. Players can use Ningguang and Geo MC as replacements. In fact, players have used them in 3-star Abyss challenges without Goro, so the game isn't hard whatsoever, but just understand the team will be less effective without the core members. As with most on-field DPS, you use your support to set Itto up, then use his burst, start attacking, and of course chuck his bullet at enemies, which hits like a truck. He's one of the more fun characters to have and is relatively easy to use. Itto has stagger resistance, so you can continue whacking enemies without worry, and his survival build is above average due to his defense-focused build. He is, however, a really high investment character. To really maximize Itto, you'll need Goro, who you may or may not have, and at least one or both of the 5 stars I already mentioned. On top of that, you need to farm for the Husk artifacts, and in terms of resin farming efficiency, that domain is not the best, as both Husk and Ocean artifacts are for niche characters. Thankfully, one of his better weapons is craftable. All 3 of his talents are also required to be leveled up, which can be very costly, unlike for example Ayato or Shogun, who do not need their normal attacks leveled. Itto, however, will need it. Other weaknesses are of course his ER. As a burst reliant character, he needs to recharge as fast as possible for that consistency. Thankfully, you'll run a Geo team, so that will help a lot. Speaking on Geo teams, again, it's not the strongest element, and because of the strict team setup, you won't really have access to other elements aside from maybe your 4th party member, which makes facing elemental shielded enemies very ineffective depending on who that 4th unit is. Despite the restrictions and being a very high investment character, if you manage to have the right team and a maxed out Itto, you'll find that he's a very powerful character to use. Next, we have the Raiden Shogun, who is one of the best characters in Genshin Impact. Her usage rate in Abyss challenges has been consistently high throughout a lot of updates, and there's a good reason why. First off, phenomenal team battery. She's someone who will charge everyone's burst while simultaneously dealing damage, and the damage is pretty good. This will lessen some ER demands for certain characters, not necessarily fix them, but it will help out tremendously. Don't forget her E can produce some particles from triggered attacks. On top of that, Shogun offers burst damage buff for everyone with 100% skill uptime. Several other strengths are that she's an excellent electro enabler off-field and a strong driver on-field. This gives you amazing team synergy for a lot of characters. The famous Raiden national team, Eula Superconduct, Electro Charge teams, Dendro teams like Hyper Bloom or Quicken, even a Raiden Shogun dedicated DPS team with Bennett and Sara is amazing. You would use her E usually at the first move because it doesn't snapshot, then swap her out, create your setup, and use everyone's burst so that Shogun's own damage will increase. Once you switch into her and activate her sword mode, she'll deal a lot of initial damage. Her attacks will also recharge everyone's burst, then repeat the rotation. Shogun isn't perfect, however. Her off-field damage is very low, meaning if you want to deal any considerable damage with her, she needs to be on-field. On-field damage is strong even at C0, but in comparison to other high-ranking DPSs, she falls a little short in terms of numbers. In terms of battery charging, her main charge is through her burst, so you're forced to use her on-field as opposed to, let's say, Fischl for example, who can stay off-field while also provide a lot of particles and therefore charging everyone's burst, which will allow you to pull off other combos. But overall, Shogun remains to be a very strong character who still dominates in high-level challenges. Finally, we have Ayato, who is yet another versatile character. You can use him in 2 ways, as an on-field DPS or as an off-field burst DPS, which means he'll typically be the enabler, similar to how you would use Ganyu's burst for cryo reactions. Like many Hydro units, Ayato can be put into a variety of teams. You have Freeze teams, Electro Charge, Hyper Bloom, Vape, many common teams you've already seen. He's also very easy to use. All you really do is use his burst first, then activate his skill and hold the attack button. That's it. He's so simple. Players do consider him quite boring to use, but despite that, Ayato is a strong single target and AoE unit. Additionally, his burst can also open up a lot of opportunities because it has such a large AoE. Paired with Ganyu, you can freeze most of the field, which is pretty fun to see. Electro Charge, Bloom, but what's great is that his burst can snapshot, unlike his E skill. Now, some issues you'll encounter are his stat priorities. Because his burst strengthens his normal, you'll need ER, but as a DPS, you'll need to balance crit rate, crit damage, and attack percentage, on top of ER of course, which was mentioned. It's a common issue for a lot of characters, so it's not really exclusive to Ayato, but it doesn't really make farming for good substats any less of a hassle, but you can lessen the ER requirements by using battery characters or another Hydro. ER requirements can range from 130% with good team members to like 170% requirement if there are no additional help. In terms of Hydro application, as mentioned, Ayato is someone who can do on and off field. Obviously, on-field deals a lot more damage compared to being off-field. Now, in comparison to other dedicated Hydro units, he slightly falls behind. For on-field Hydro, there's Child, who can apply the element faster, then there's Kokomi, who can apply off or on-field, while also healing and has become a highly used and valuable character for Abyss. For off-field, of course, you have Yelan and Xingqiu. This doesn't mean Ayato is no longer viable, and we should never fully compare characters since each one is unique to a degree. We should, however, use comparison to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of a character and to understand how they're different. Example would be Ayato's large AoE burst having more consistency at applying Hydro to enemies compared to Child's burst, despite Child applying Hydro faster on field. So, who should you pull for on the 3.3 banners? Keep in mind this recommendation is based on C0 because that's the most realistic for a lot of players. Most obvious answer is the Raiden Shogun. She's an incredible unit who has some flaws, but her strengths outweigh them. If we're talking about meta and tier lists, she has been ranked as an S tier unit by tons of players within the community, and I'm talking about S being the top, not those S-, S+, SS, SSS+ ranks, okay? So just S, A, B, C, and so on. Sure, you have some who says she's awful, but that comes with every community. Statistically, she's always approached the top 5 most used characters in Abyss throughout multiple updates. I'm not saying Raiden Shogun is the be-all and end-all, that you must absolutely have to get her, otherwise your account sucks. No, that's not what I'm saying, but having her will give you great advantages. Raiden National is one of the strongest variations of the national team. She offers good damage and support, strong electro enabler, and can fit into a lot of teams. Even if you already have her at C0, trying to aim for C2 will make her even more godly, and she'll become one of the highest DPS in the game, and I know this community loves seeing those big numbers on screen, so that in itself makes her the highest priority. Next priority would be Arataki Itto, who is the strongest Geo DPS in Genshin, but this is more so a situational recommendation. If you do not have Goro and Albedo or Zhongli, so basically the dog with either one of the 5 stars, having all 3 though would be a lot better, but you know, gacha gods kind of hate us sometimes, then you would benefit more by going with Scara or Ayato. Yes, Goro and the other 2 units is not necessary, and players have beaten Abyss with mixed units, but they are the ones that pushes Itto into becoming one of the highest DPS. Within a fully built Geo Itto team, you cover a lot of things. Massive AoE and single target damage since Goro buffs Itto and Albedo, easy burst spamming because everyone's using the same element, and for defense you'll usually have a shielder, if not Zhongli, then Diona. Now unfortunately, Geo is not an elemental reaction focused playstyle, and Genshin has been moving towards a reaction meta, so to speak, so it's understandable to have Ayato slightly above Itto, especially if you don't have Goro or one of the 2 5 stars that contributes into making Itto great. Now Ayato has tough hydro competition, and without a doubt Itto stands out a lot more, but Ayato is still a very reliable character. In fact, because Ayato can fit into basically most teams, has better artifacts selection, meaning farming is a bit easier, does not require a specific team built around him, and is one of the easiest characters to use, he's actually very player friendly. With Dendro now being introduced, he has increased worth thanks to bloom type reactions, as stated multiple times, good hydro applications, and great damage. It's true that he isn't the best on or off field hydro enabler or driver, but what makes him unique is the ability to interchangeably do both, which can become a strong asset. Lastly, Scaramouche. By the way, I'm going to continue calling him Scaramouche. A few players says he's not Scaramouche anymore because of story reasons, but he's still the same cocky brat in my eyes. As of now, we obviously do not 100% know how strong he is gameplay wise since he's not officially out yet. According to TCs, he looks to be around the same tier or ranking as Ayato and Itto, all being around A level. He could be an S tier character, but it's hard to recommend him above units we have actual data on. He isn't like Nahida, where we know she would be the best Dendro enabler and driver on release. Nonetheless, Scara has phenomenal potential. Again, he fits into a variety of teams, and according to leaked gameplay, he deals good damage. Being an animal user, you can use the Viridescent to shred elemental resistance, basically increasing damage for characters, and of course, swirl damage boost for himself. He's going to receive a specialized artifact set, which will increase his attack speed and damage from normal, charge, and plunge after using a charged attack. For more animal damage, Farzan is an asset and will strengthen animal hypercarries, so Zhao fans, we gotta win! If you follow leaks, there has been some nerfs here and there for Farzan, but she's still going to be helpful. Just understand that 4 stars are sometimes harder to get than 5 stars. I mean, I wouldn't know. I got 3 copies of Child without a single copy of Layla showing up. So, to break it down, Shogun should be your first priority because of how helpful she can be. Next is Arataki Itto, only if you have his dedicated team. With them, Itto becomes a DPS monster. If you don't have them, then Ayato would be recommended because of his team flexibility and damage potential. As always, I would recommend waiting a few days if you're unsure about pulling for Scaramouche, which is why he's the least prioritized. He has the potential to take the second spot, but if you can fight the gacha itch to pull for him, waiting would be the safer option. Remember, go for who you like. Meta characters can help make life easier, but enjoyment comes first. So comment down below to let me know who you're pulling for. As always, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future Genshin Impact videos. Good luck on your poses, everyone. Till next time.